Antonio Pierce is officially the guy to lead the Raiders moving forward, and after some exciting offseason moves, this begs the question: how far away are the Raiders? Let's go ahead and discuss. What's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome back to the Deep Dive series where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today, I got your Las Vegas Raiders. And of course, before we look to the future, we got to take a look at the past and unfortunately Josh McDaniels. The Raiders began the season with a 1-point victory over the Denver Broncos. The offense wasn't flashy with Jimmy G at the helm, but he brought some stability to the offense, or so we thought. The Raiders would lose the next two games where the offense was absolutely inept, and Jimmy G would suffer a concussion, so rookie Aiden O'Connell would get the start in Week 4. O'Connell's first career start went as well as you would expect in a loss to the Chargers, but the one thing the Raiders had going for them was their defense, which led them to victories over the Packers and the Patriots. Jimmy G was either hurt or just playing poorly, and Aiden O'Connell eventually became the full-time starter, but the other thorn in the side of this offense was the play calling of Josh McDaniels. He would eventually be fired alongside offensive coordinator Mick Lombardi after a loss to the Lions that put the Raiders at 3-5. Then linebackers coach Antonio Pierce would take over as the interim head coach, and the culture of the locker room in this organization would vastly change. The Raiders would finish the second half of the season 5-4 with a plus 62 point differential, and that would include a win over the eventual Super Bowl champs, Kansas City Chiefs, and a one-score loss to the Dolphins in Miami. The offense was the Achilles heel of the Raiders, as Josh McDaniels didn't end up being the offensive guru everyone thought he was. Aiden O'Connell had some flashes, and they were definitely better after McDaniels was fired, but this team was largely carried by the defense, which ranked 8th in run defense, 10th in pass defense, and 9th in points allowed. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. In my opinion, the biggest losses this offseason was offensive tackle Jermaine Illuminor and running back Josh Jacobs. But the Raiders did lose some guys who played some significant snaps, like Greg Van Roten. You got Marcus Peters, Amik Robertson, Bilal Nichols, Jerry Tillery, all of whom played over 500 snaps this past season. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about what they added to the squad. So the Raiders opened the offseason by breaking my heart as a Dolphins fan and signing Christian Wilkins, a 4-year, $110 million deal. Listen, this is a great gift for you, Raiders. Dolphins, they just financially couldn't hold on to him, unfortunately. I think he's a very, very good, like, high upside player. I say high upside. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a top like 5 interior in the league, but he's definitely a top 10. The guy is hella good, whether it's against the run or he's developed a lot better as a pass rusher than I'd expect. He's just a wonderful addition to that defensive line that already has Max Crosby, that has promising young pieces in Tyree Wilson, Malcolm Kuntz. So great addition. On top of that, they went out and they got a quarterback. It's Minshew Mania in Las Vegas, baby. Oh, things about to get wild. Things about to get crazy. I know this isn't the sexiest pickup at quarterback for the Raiders, but I mean, in all honesty, I think he's a solid option. You bring him on, what, a 2-year deal for $25 million, 15 of it's guaranteed. So I guarantee you that's all in season 1. And you're probably going to be, it gives you time to look for that next quarterback. But like the unfortunate thing about getting like a Gardner Minshew and not really having a quarterback of the future in place, though I know some people will be like, well, what about Aiden O'Connell? I think could be a high upside backup in the league. I don't know. I don't exactly believe in the starting potential. Anyway, I mean, and you're always shooting for a guy that potentially could be a top 10, top 12 starter in the league at quarterback. I just don't think that's him. But the problems with a guy like Gardner Minshew is he's probably going to keep you good enough from drafting one. The fortunate thing is, with at least currently with this 2025 NFL draft class, I feel like the first round talent at quarterback is more middle or back of the first round. Again, a lot can change in a year, but I guess take some solace that Gardner Minshew is going to keep you competitive, and you can maybe still get your guy in the draft or maybe via free agency. I don't know what next year's quarterback market's going to look like in free agency. I can't imagine it being too wild or too crazy. But we also got Alexander Mattison. Zamir White's going to be the guy. I hope they give him the workload too. I hope Mattison doesn't eat too much into his workload. He's just been unable to be efficient. And like last year, he was the guy for the Vikings. And some of that was injury. Some of that was just him being ineffective. So like, yeah, probably he's a backup caliber player. And there's not much zest to the backfield there for the Raiders. Outside, like again, Zamir White, he had a hot end of the year last season, but a lot of that with him is going to be guesswork in terms of what he's going to do next year. Because I liked him in the NFL draft, I just didn't love him. I don't think he's a very dynamic back. Got good size, good speed, but in terms of like making guys miss, that's just not who he is. But Mattison ends up being a solid guy to add to the rotation there. And I'm glad they actually took a shot on someone else in the draft, which we'll talk about the draft in a little bit. But they also come away with, I love that they re-signed Adam Butler. He was so good for them last year. Let's see, who else did they snag here? They bring in Cody Whitehair as a backup, solid veteran backup, because you have injuries along the interior of that offensive line. That's good. That's solid. I like that. They also end up adding Harrison Bryant, like low key. This was like one of my more favorite sign-ins for the Raiders. Like he was probably my third favorite sign-in by the Raiders. Because like Christian Wilkins, come on. But like Harrison Bryant, like low key has been a very solid tight end too in the league. And since coming out of, I think it was Florida Atlantic, like he's gonna end up being the tight end 2 or tight end 3 for this squad because of who they drafted. But like that's a solid, really good tight end core, which kind of works for what Luke Getsy typically does schematically. So I like the addition of Bryant, and it's at a very low cost of being a potential max deal for $4 million. They also bring in Michael Gallup to the wide receiver core in that wide receiver room, because wide receiver 3 is kind of wide open. I know some people really like Trey Tucker, but I think getting some competition is not a bad way to go. And you get some like good size with like a Michael Gallup, who is 6'1", around that 200 pounds, opposed to Trey Tucker. They also brought in Andreas Pete to the offensive line, who he's also going to be a backup, but he gives you guard/tackle versatility. If injuries do happen, then you don't have to turn, like if injury happens at tackle, you don't have to immediately turn to third-round rookie DJ Glaze. You could go with Andreas Pete, a guy who has played tackle in this league. If something goes down at guard and you're not confident like Cody Whitehair, because like he hasn't been good in a few years and he's been often hurt, Pete's probably he's a better guard than tackle. So like he gives you good depth there on the offensive line. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this draft because it was pretty fun So the Raiders shocked me by using the 13th overall pick to take Brock Bowers. Now, I did think Bowers was going to go earlier than this, but I didn't really peg the Raiders to go after. I really bought into them going with a tackle here, but they get Brock Bowers, and honestly, in hindsight, it makes a ton of sense. Luke Getsy plays a lot of 12 personnel, so like Bowers, someone who can work in line and work, whether it's in the slot or even out wide. Pairing him up with Michael Mayer, like you might have one of the most talented tight end rooms in the league. That's just hella fun. So I like them adding a playmaker, because straight up, Brock Bowers probably should have went top 10, but it was a very good offensive draft. So we saw guys fall because of, well, the tackle depth, the wide receiver depth. And then the Raiders, a team after my own heart at this point. I absolutely loved Jackson Powers-Johnson. He was my guy. I had to be one of the first guys like talking about him as a potential like top 75 player. I had him by the end of the process as a first rounder. He ends up slipping to the middle of the second round, and the Raiders swoop him up. He's going to be playing left guard for him. I love that. I love him on the interior. This was someone who played exceptionally well at center last season. He played guard the season prior. So I love the addition. I love the commitment to the offensive line, and honestly, how that's going to work out for Zamir White. I just love it. I love it. And then DJ Glaze wasn't absolutely in love with this pickup. When it came to DJ Glaze, I had him more in that early day 3 range. But I get it. The tackle talent just kind of flew off the board. They really wanted to come away with the tackle. And like Glaze isn't all that, like honestly, isn't all that bad. I kind of like pegged him as a potential guard in the NFL, but I think he had the at least the length and the size to stick at tackle. So they're gonna get a chance to develop this guy. They're gonna get a chance to develop him, and maybe ends up being the future heir apparent to Colton Miller if they want to move off him, or maybe if their Mumford's not really in the long-term plans, he ends up playing right tackle, which, I mean, to be fair, let's go take a look at Glaze. He did play right tackle in 2021 for Maryland and in 2022, and then moved to the left side in 2023. So he's got experience on both sides of the line, so you love to see it. And then in round 4, like, I think the Raiders got to a point in the draft where they were like, okay, let's just take guys that are either within this range or that are fallen. Always a great philosophy. Take the best players available. And they really started to address positions of big time value, going out and getting Decamarion Richardson. This guy is battle tested in the SEC. Great size at like 6'1", 188, I think was what he was listed at. 6'2", 188, but ran a 4.34. The thing with him is just not a lot of ball skills, or at least not a lot of splash plays in coverage. But he played exceptionally well the last couple of years in the SEC. This is the corner position, a position that, honestly, that corner 2 spot's kind of wide open right now with Jacorian Bennett. So now you're just adding more competition. That's what you want at corner, man. You want a deep cornerback room. You want depth, competition, because it's a volatile position. So I like that. And I like that they didn't stop addressing the corner position. We'll get to their 7th round pick in a sack. But in round 5, they go after Tommy Eichenberg, who I thought could have went higher than this. Just kind of feels like an Antonio Pierce type of guy. He did have a bit of a down year in terms of production compared to his 2022, but you're getting a really, really good linebacker. Did he end up tested during the process? He didn't run, but the explosive scores were nothing special. Solid agility scores, but Yeah, I mean, again, man, he's someone who was very solid for Ohio State. Sure, tackler. Was kind of protected schematically there by the Buckeyes. They typically do that with their linebackers. But I think he's a good enough athlete where you don't have to worry about that too much, and someone who could maybe even crack the starter lineup at some point during his first 4 years in the league. And then at round 6, Dylan Labe out of New Hampshire. I like this. You're looking at Zamir White. You're like, man. You're looking at Alexander Madison. You're like, man, we're not that dynamic in the backfield. Let's go out and let's get us a receiving back. And he brings return ability. You'll love it. Lobby was a really, really good pickup. Now, he's not going to blow anyone away with like speed. Ran a 4.54, which is still hella good. But if you want to go and look at like what he did as a receiver, over 700 yards last season for New Hampshire, had 18 total touchdowns. He had 671 return yards. So like straight up, he's more receiver than he is a running back. So like he's gonna give you some, like you could throw him in the slot and be a-okay with it. Like his receiving, his route tree is a bit more complete than you typically see from a college running back. So I like that they threw a little zest in that backfield. And then I really loved their 7th-round picks. Their 7th-round picks were solid. Trey Taylor, if you're unfamiliar with Trey Taylor, he is, I believe, the cousin. Tell me how that works, of Ed Reed. Let me just go and confirm. He is he is the cousin, some way somehow, of Ed Reed. His father played linebacker at SMU back in the day. And if you were unaware, he was the Thorpe award winner this past season. He is a very versatile defensive back. You could play him the box, you could play him deep, which that works well. This is a defense that played a lot of cover 3 last year. You could honestly play him at one of the corner positions, and I think he'd be okay. He's that kind of athlete. He's a hell of a good athlete who also breeds pretty solid ball skills, man. Had 3 interceptions last year. Now, I'm not saying like you could probably play on the outside. You will have to protect him somewhat because it's not like he's a blazer. Ran like a 4.59, but I think in the slot you can make it work, especially against the run game. He only had a missed tackle rate of 12.3% there at Air Force. And then MJ Devonshire. Man, this team knew it wanted to get better in the secondary. I loved Devonshire. I thought he was another guy that was my guy. That I had a 5th-round grade on him, coming in at 6 foot, 189, ran a 4.45. Love to see it. Had 4 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. Someone who took a couple of those interceptions to the house. You'll probably remember a couple of years ago in the opener, Pittsburgh versus West Virginia, he had the game winning pick 6. He had another one last season, not a game winning, but he had a pick 6 last year. And this is a guy that had return experience back in high school. He had like 8 punt returns and kick returns, just utterly ludicrous. But he does play a bit high risk, high reward. So he's going to have slot. He's going to have outside capabilities. So he gives you some versatility. I just like that they took multiple swings in the secondary to get better there. Because, like, you know, honestly, like they just spent on the defensive line. They're probably real comfortable with what they have at linebacker. So if you were going to improve on defense, it was going to be in the secondary. So, like, this ended up being a really good class, I think. A really solid class for the Raiders that I think that's going to churn out, at least in my opinion, at least 3 starters long term for the Raiders. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this coaching staff, and let's talk about Antonio Pierce. Josh McDaniels was fired halfway through the season, and Antonio Pierce came running to the rescue as the former linebackers coach stepped up as the interim head coach and did just such a phenomenal job. Just changing the atmosphere of the locker room, and he is truly a player's guy. Like, players were going to bat like, hey, they should bring him back. And for once, the Raiders listened to the players. They listened to the locker room, and they decided, you know what, let's do it. We're going to make Antonio Pierce the head coach. And if you're unfamiliar with Antonio Pierce, he was, prior to being the Raiders linebacker coach, he was the DC over at Arizona State for the Sun Devils, as well as being the associate head coach. And prior to that, he had a 9-year career as a linebacker for the Washington Redskins and the New York Football Giants. So I'm very excited in what he's going to do. And I think he's going to be more of a CEO type, because he's got a hell of a defensive coordinator in Patrick Graham. He is a wonderful defensive mind. He has been in the league, actually, feels like a long time, since 2009, where he was under Bill Belichick as a positions coach. He's seen success elsewhere, as the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Not a lot of success when he was the Giants DC, but I don't know, that whole thing was a mess with Joe Judge in town. But like, he is a very good defensive mind, and it was kind of strange because he didn't do things normally. Like, we didn't see, like, typically we're seeing like multiple fronts, and a moderately high blitz rate around like 27%. And last year, it was more just, hey, go and get them, boys. Like, his blitz rate was 29th in the league at 19.4%. And typically when you see a low blitz rate, you're going to assume, okay, so they probably schemed up a lot of things. So like stunts, loops, and such. But no, there wasn't much of that. They were also in the near the bottom of the league when it came to their stunt usage. So he was legitimately saying, hey, Max, I know you're good as hell. Go and get after it. Go create that pressure. That's where we saw Malcolm Koonce kind of succeed in that role last year as well. So I don't know if he's going to maybe change things up a little bit when it comes to what they do to get pressure. Because again, it was a bit uncharacteristic, at least from what we normally seen. But I don't know, man. Maybe he's just like, hey, I'm just going to ask my guys to pin their ears back and go and get after it. Then when it comes to the coverage, Graham's always kind of been more of a zone-heavy guy anyway, so we saw a lot of cover 3. When they weren't in cover 3, they were playing quarters. They like to give the defense or give the offense multiple looks, whether that's single high, double high. So, yeah, man, just Graham's just hella good. But Luke Getsy ends up being their get at offensive coordinator. They did miss out on Cliff Kingsbury. He ends up accepting the job with the Commanders. And Luke Getsy is interested. Like, as you can see, my defensive grades for the coaching are a hell of a lot higher than what I have Getsy's. And I don't know, man. They were playing the blame game in Chicago last year. Getsy is like, hey, man, I really didn't have like the resources or the guys to like truly run my scheme. Is that like, so maybe he felt hampered? I don't know, man. I don't know if I have a lot of faith in this, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm kind of hoping he opens the playbook, because honestly, like, it was really the play calling. And I know you don't want to hear this, Raiders fans. You just got done with Josh McDaniels and his play calling. So I don't know. I'm going to be fascinated, because I really thought the play calling was a bit stale. You'd see like, okay, 2nd, 3rd and longs, like screens. Like, what the hell are we doing here? Because like, that's what he ran last year. He was a very inside zone heavy run game. And I don't know, maybe he opens the playbook a little bit more. Because like, we know he was a QB's coach under Matt LaFleur. So maybe we see some wide zone incorporated into that. Maybe we see some more power concepts incorporated into that, because maybe he feels like he's working with a better offensive line than what he had in Chicago's. Because keep in mind, Chicago, they had injuries along the offensive line. You had a rookie at right tackle, though he played pretty well down the stretch. So like, there were some things in plays where it was like, okay, maybe he didn't exactly open up the playbook. But on top of that, he plays a hell of a lot 12 personnel. So pick or taking Brock Bowers kind of makes some sense. That he's going to come out in these 2 tight end sets and he's going to make use of those tight ends. Also, dude ran a lot of RPOs and a lot of screens last season, which I mean that'll work to the benefit for Gardner Minshew. He's got a bit of a noodle of an arm, but I hope he's just not as predictable last year as he was. Maybe when you come out of shotgun, take some shots in the middle of the field. Like, you don't always have to attack the outside. And I mean, to be fair, when you got tight ends like this, you should be able to attack the middle of the field with a bit more ease. But there is some hesitancy when it comes to Luke Getsy. It's going to be fascinating to see how he does in year 1 with the Raiders. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the rest of this coaching staff, because I ain't gonna lie to y'all, man. It's kind of interesting. So Marvin Lewis is coming as the assistant head coach. This is a guy who spent 15, 16 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's easy to look at his tenure and be like, man, that team was so mid for so long. But he's a guy that lasted as a head coach there for a long time. He's going to have some good advice for Antonio Pierce, this being his first head coaching role. Hey, forget about coordinator. The dude, sure, Pierce was a coordinator with the Sun Devils, but he's jumping from position coach to head coach. It's going to be fascinating. So having a guy like Marvin Lewis, who's been there, done that, I think is a big plus. Looking at the offensive coaches, you got Edgar Bennett, who's a very, very solid wide receivers coach, been around the league for a long time. James Craig, who it says here he's only got 9 years of experience. I think that's probably for the NFL, because he has spent some time in college. He was the LSU offensive line coach, and honestly, last few years, that team's kind of been pumping out offensive line talent. Might not always be highly drafted, but he's been pumping out. To be fair, there's a good shot that Will Campbell and Emory Jones ends up being first round talents there at LSU, and he was kind of a big part of their early success from their freshman year to their sophomore year. So I think Craig's gonna be or Krieg, however you say that, is gonna be a good guy for the job here. But you also have Joe Philbin, who has been in the league for a while, former Dolphins. Was he the Dolphins head coach for a little bit, or was he the OC? I don't know why I always get Joe Philbin and Bill Lazor confused. Lazor was the OC under Adam Gase. I try not to think about those years, but I'm fairly confident Philbin was the head coach for the Dolphins. Yeah, he was the head coach for 3 years. Okay. Oh, you know what? You know what just clicked? I'm pretty sure, wasn't he a part of... Oh, maybe I'm thinking of Cameron. Never mind. Look at me trying to rehash some of my bad Dolphins memories. Nonetheless, man, the dude's got a ton of experience, and actually probably more oriented to coaching the offensive line, but he's going to be a senior offensive assistant here. They also have Scott Turner's back as the passing game coordinator. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. I'll leave that up to you. Carnell Williams, Cadillac Williams is a running back coach. Let's go, man. Going back to my Dolphins memories, man. I remember at Auburn, you had Cadillac, you had Ronnie Brown, and as a Dolphins fan, back when it was cool to draft running backs in the top 10, I wanted one of those guys. We ended up getting Ronnie Brown. But Cadillac, he was at Auburn last year, I think. But now he's here as the running backs coach. So that's kind of cool. Again, I love seeing former players end up or just start to move up through the coaching chain. Take a look at the defensive coaches here, as you got Mike Caldwell, a lot of experience in the NFL. He's here as the run game coordinator and linebackers coach. Gerald Alexander's the safeties coach, another former player. Andre Carter, the pass rush specialist, another former player. Who else we got here? Oh, I love this. Ricky Manning Jr. He was the defensive backs assistant coach last season for the Jets. Now he's actually a quarterbacks coach here with the Raiders, and I think that's very exciting. I really do. Ricky Manning was fun to watch back in the day. Back again is Rob Ryan as the senior defensive assistant. Got to love it. So they got a lot of names to like here as that are just part of the coaching staff. I just find it hella fun, and it kind of has me rooting, just rooting for this team to succeed. Like, honestly, my one question mark is Luke Getsy. But let's go ahead. Speaking of Luke Getsy, let's talk about the offense he's going to be working with. Per usual, you will see my grades for each position group over here. Let's go ahead, start at quarterback, because I said I love Gardner Minshew. I love Uncle Rico, but I got a D+ for the quarterback room there, because I do think it's probably one of the more meh quarterback rooms in the NFL. Like I said, Aiden O'Connell, I feel like he's more of a high-end backup. I don't really see like a top half of the league starter in him. And with Gardner Minshew, sure, he almost helped led the Colts to the playoffs last year after Anthony Richardson got hurt, but he had plenty of bad games last season. That's not fair to say plenty. Like, he had 2 very bad games. Like, if you go look at his analytics, 14 big time throws to 22 turnover worthy plays. Be fair, 12 of those turnover worthy plays came in 2 games, one being against the Jags in week 6, and then the following week in week 7 against the Cleveland Browns. And to be fair, after that, he kind of hit his stride and he took better care of the football. The adjusted completion percentage was really good down the stretch for Gardner Minshew. And I think he's not going to give you really much of a high ceiling, but he does play with a bit more excitement than a Jimmy G. And for all intents and purposes, I think this is a team that's going to largely try to run the ball down your throat. And if they can't get easy yards on the ground, then they're probably going to go with a lot of RPOs and screen game. And I don't expect too many downfield shots from the squad, just because, again, Gardner Minshew's just got that noodle of a cannon. That's just the plain Jane facts of the matter. And I know some people are going to be mad that I don't love the running back room, because honestly, like, you could have hopes for some guys like Zamir White and Dylan Lobby, but there's many better running back rooms in the league by comparison. And again, Zamir White's kind of a question mark. He just kind of is. He turned it on during the last half of the season. Liked what I saw. Let's go ahead and take a look specifically at his last. Okay, let's go with the last 4 games, because that's where he ran for a bulk of his yards. Essentially averaged over 100 yards in each of those games. Had 4.3 yards per attempt. But 3.21 yards after contact. That's fine. That's fair. 15 forced missed tackles. His missed tackle rate's not all that great. Again, this is a guy, if you give him some daylight, he could probably not necessarily take it to the house, but he could take it to the house. He could do some damage with it. But it is one of the more lackluster running back rooms, because again, Zamir White, we're only basing this off of that 4-game sample size from him. Alexander Madison was a bit of a letdown last year. Amir Abdullah is more of a special teams guy. And Dylan Lobby is going to function probably as the receiving back. Though you can make a good case for Amir Abdullah doing that. But yeah, it's just one of the more lackluster groups. Kind of is what it is. Now let's talk about where I get excited with this team. As you'll notice, I have Brock Bowers in the flex. I did say this is a team that's probably going to be using a lot of 12 personnel, so I think Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer are going to be on the field a hell of a lot. They're going to be very, very good targets there for Gardner Minshew. Of course, you got Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is going to act like the Michael Pittman or Gardner Minshew. He likes to really hone in on that just primary target. You didn't really see Gardner Minshew distribute the ball to many different receivers last year. It was kind of like, all right, man, it's Michael Pittman or maybe a sprinkle of Josh Downs, and outside of that, that was about it. That was virtually about it. So I'm kind of interested to see how Jacoby Myers plays into all this, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I don't expect Gardner Minshew's production to be much different than it was last year for the Colts, because I don't think this offense is better than what the Colts had. If anything, I mean, you could maybe make a case it's on par, but I think then you're being disingenuous. I think the Colts have a better offense. That's just kind of the facts. It's just kind of the facts. It's great to have Devontae Adams, and Jacoby Myers played a hella good last year for the squad. Finally got some touchdowns. That was kind of a thing in New England where it was like, oh man, got all these targets and no touchdowns. Had 8 of them last year. A very solid season. I am curious though how involved he's going to end up being with this offense. When it comes to this offensive line, I like it. I like it quite a bit. Dylan Parham's finally moving from left guard to right guard. Don't know why that move wasn't done much earlier. The best years of Parham's career at Memphis was on the right side. Back in 2020, he was playing right tackle. Back in 2021, he was playing right guard. That season. So, like, I don't get it when you see his rookie year. Oh, he's playing better at right guard than left guard. Why are you keeping him at left guard? I don't know. Josh McDaniels is a madman, I guess. But it's nice to see him there at right guard. Jackson Powers-Johnson will be filling in that left guard spot. Though I do think you can make a case depending on, I think he's pro ready. You know what? I'm not even worried about it. But you can make a case that Andreas Pete maybe ends up winning the job early if they're not confident in the rookie. But I think that's kind of poppycock. I don't know why I even mentioned it. Then Colton Miller, still hella good. Hella good. One of the best tackles in the league. Gotta love it. Then you also have Thayer Mumford. I know some people aren't going to be wild about Mumford being the designated starter there at right tackle, but I think he's fine. If he's the worst player on your offensive line, you're probably in really, really good shape. He was a very good run blocker for the squad last season. So I think it's all right. If he's the worst player on the offensive line, your offensive line's probably in good shape. They brought back Andre Carter. I think that was a good move. He was very, very solid for them. I think he's one of the better centers in the league. So I actually feel pretty darn good about the offensive line, though, when it does come to the pass protection. I am kind of curious about Dylan Parham and Thayer Mumford there on the right side. How good will Jackson Powers-Johnson be early in his career? So, I do have some hesitancies there. That's why pass blocking grade isn't through the moon, so to speak. But let's take a look at the rest of this roster for the offense. Let's stick with the offensive line. You got DJ Glaze there, but I do strictly believe that if an injury were to occur, it's Andreas Pete. That'll probably be the next tackle up. It's great that he's played tackle and guard during his career, and I think if you're not confident in Glaze started early, then they probably go with Pete as a starter if Mumford or Miller goes down. When it comes to the interior, fun fact, it's Andreas Pete again. He's a better guard than he is tackle, even though he is on the taller side. That's fine. That's A-okay. I think they're probably going to keep Cody Whitehair at center if injury does occur. But Whitehair's not a bad option there as a depth player. But again, Glaze, I'm kind of curious what his projection will be. If he ends up being like a Colton Miller replacement, or is this maybe a potential upgrade over there, Mumford, like for the future, obviously. Some of the other guys they have here, Jordan Meredith, Dalton Wagner, former UDFAs, they're just kind of here. You're kind of developing them. Jalen McKenzie I actually really liked coming out of, I think it was USC, and just more of a developmental guy, and things just haven't really worked out for him thus yet. They also grabbed Andrew Coker as a free UDFA out of TCU. A lot of people thought he may have been a draftable prospect, more of like a late D3, but nonetheless, probably a guy that's going to play on the practice squad. Will Putnam, didn't really watch much of him out of Clemson last year, so I couldn't tell you much. Clark Barrington, former like BYU, went to Baylor. There's not much upside when it comes to him, but I think he could maybe develop into a solid backup at some juncture in his career. So when it comes to like injuries on the offensive line, I feel like Andreas Pete's gonna be the guy. He's gonna be the guy. Let's talk about the running back room, because I think they're going to be running behind a very solid offensive line. Zamir White, I think, is going to eat this year, and depending on what the rotation looks like, I'm kind of hoping it's not Madison. That's that next back end, that they really try to ride Zamir White, kind of make him the bell cow, and then you kind of sprinkle in like Amir Abdullah or Dylan Lobby, and if you want to get fancy in the receiving game with those guys, that's kind of what I prefer. But like nonetheless, a couple of long shots to make the roster here is Brenton Brown and Sincere McCormick. I liked both of these guys coming out as well. I guess Brenton Brown ended up being drafted at UCLA in the 7th. Sincere McCormick was a UDFA at a UTSA, and I just a bowling ball build. I'm kind of a sucker for those guys that have low center of gravities. They're long shots to make the roster. They might make the practice squad, but for the most part, it's going to be Lobby. It's going to be Abdullah. Like, they love what he does on special teams. His roster spot is solidified. Then Alexander Madison. Maybe can you bounce back after kind of, I don't want to say failing, but falling short on your expectations in 2023. Then we have the pass catchers. Yes, we do. I love the tight end group. If they might honestly just end up holding 3 tight ends, but I mean, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Harrison Bryant is a hell of a scary tight end group. It's great. And then I mean, Zach Gentry is actually pretty solid in his own right. When it comes to the receivers, I honestly think they're only going to keep 5 on the roster. As Devontae Adams, man, he may be 31, but he's still doing his dang thing. Had over 1,100 yards last season. Jacoby Myers was a very good compliment to him. And then I think they have a couple of interesting guys here as, I would say, vertical threats. As Trey Tucker wasn't the Cincinnati receiver I liked coming out of that 2023 class. I was more of a Tyler Scott guy, but you're dealing with an undersized speedster who can also function as a gadget player. Michael Gallup gives you a little bit more size, more of that jump ball guy downfield, who's just kind of just hasn't been productive the last few seasons. I think he's like last 3 years he's had 400 yards each of those years. Then Jalen Guyton's also another bigger body speedster that can attack downfield. I think they probably end up just keeping those 5 guys. I really do. They list DJ Turner here as the wide receiver 6. List him in the slot, rightfully so. 5'9", like 200 pounds. He's kind of built like a running back, more of a gadget player. I think he's kind of a long shot to make team. If they honestly end up like keeping another guy, because in all honesty, I'm not too familiar with guys like Christian Wilkerson Tyreek McAllister. Maybe you keep a Ramel Keaton or a Tulu Griffin. I think Keaton's got a little bit more size on him. Yeah, coming in 6'2", 191 pounds, 2'2". More of this speedster who can also function as a return man. Little more has a little less size than Keaton does. One of those guys maybe end up making the roster. I don't know. I'm kind of sold on this team only keeping 5 wide receivers. That's just probably where I'm at with it. And then at quarterback, you do have Aiden O'Connell. I feel like him and Gardner Minshew, I don't think either one has more upside than the other. Maybe O'Connell has a bit more arm to him, but I think Gardner Minshew has been around the league longer. He's just kind of got that grit, that moxie, that gravitas. Honestly, I don't think the Raiders lose or gain anything by having one start over the other. It's kind of where I'm at when it comes to the quarterbacks here. You have Anthony Brown, Bradley Carter. One of those guys are going to be the emergency quarterback. Bradley Carter, low upside guy. Gus Bradley's son, actually. But kind of is what it is. But let's go ahead. Let's talk some defense. When it comes to this defense, this is who I think your starters are going to be, or at least your lead snap getters, the guys who are going to be on the field the most. Let's start with the defensive line. Max Crosby, obviously one of the best edge players in the NFL. And now you add this offseason one of the best interior players, a top 10 interior player in the league, in Christian Wilkins. Fins up, baby. But for the remainder of those spots, I think you're going to see very much a rotation. For instance, John Jenkins, this nice space eater who just a big body space eater, is going to predominantly be playing the run. He played a lot against the run last season. And then on those passing situations, that's when you bring in an Adam Butler, who was exceptionally productive last season, 28 pressures, 6 sacks. And I like him now even more that you had Christian Wilkins. And suddenly, I'm feeling good about the interior of this defensive line. And then at the other edge position, I think Malcolm Koonce has kind of earned it as they still continue to develop Tyree Wilson. And even then, we saw Tyree Wilson be a bit versatile, as sometimes he would kick inside and whatnot. So it kind of opens up just what you can do with this defensive line. Looking specifically at Koonce last season, 52 pressures, 8 sacks, wonderful. Admittedly, Tyree Wilson got better down the stretch as he ended up finishing the year with 24 pressures, 4 sacks. And I mean, he's still going to be probably predominantly on the outside. That's why you draft him so high. But I think it'll be very fascinating if you really like maybe on passing downs, you bring in Tyree Wilson to just like kick him inside and then just have him have at it. Just go out there and get it. But let's look at the depth along that defensive line. As I kind of already mentioned, Tyree Wilson. You have Janarius Robinson kind of jumping teams at this point. He was a depth player for Kansas City not too long ago. They also have Ellerson Smith, who was once of the New York Giants, was drafted out of there. Charles Snowden. I think Snowden was on the Giants too, right? But he was a bit of a tweener coming out. Like, none of these guys really make me feel good in terms of the depth. These are all guys that are currently trying to be developed. They're not vets. They've only been in the league for a few seasons. So it's like, and that's fine. These are guys you're taking shots on and hoping one of them develops. But you know your top 3 edges. Max Crosby's being on the field for a hell of a lot. You really just need another edge there. This might be a hot take, but I actually preferred Ron Stone Jr. over Brendan Jackson, who actually got drafted Stone was the Washington State prospect I liked a bit more. I know he's a bit more undersized, and that's probably why Brendan ends up getting drafted, better size. But like Stone, I thought was the more disruptive pass rusher. So he's probably could end up on the practice squad. That's probably where he's going to end up landing. But when it comes to the interior, yeah, I mean, they drafted guys like Byron Young, Matthew Butler there on the interior, hoping to develop one of those guys. They also brought in like a Nesta Jade, Silvera, formerly of the Hurricanes. There we go. DU, baby. DU was also at Arizona State. Who's, if I'm going to be honest, kind of always felt like he'd be a depth player, but like he's a great locker room guy. So I'm kind of curious if like Butler, because I liked Butler coming out. I assume like they're kind of hoping Butler one day could like take that Adam Butler role maybe and be that just that pass rusher from the interior and passing situations. Marquand McCall's here, just a big body space eater at this point. But for the most part, your rotation is Wilkins, Jenkins, and Butler, and you might sprinkle in Young and Matthew Butler for like potentially 100 snaps a piece at best. But like I really like the defensive line, man. I really, really do. That's why I got the pass rush grade as a B, because again, I'm still kind of I want to wait and see how if Tyree Wilson could maybe step up and take that next step. They're definitely headed in the right direction, and some people might think a B grade's low, and I probably agree with you. It looks low, but I mean that for them that puts me puts. I know some people will look at that B grade and feel like it looks low, and I don't disagree. But for me, a B means they're in that like 10 to 15 range. Yeah, so like, and I think it's true, man. The NFL, they got a lot of good defensive lines out there, so it's kind of hard to be among the best. And I feel like the Raiders are in the upper echelon of like that middle group, you know. And then when it comes to their run defense, I think they're greatly improved. I think they're going to do good things, and we can move to the linebacker core here as you got Robert Spillane, who's kind of had a career resurgence, I guess. Like, I mean, he got brought to the squad, and he was kind of looked at as more of like this. Yeah, he's an average player. He's fine. He is what it is, and I get it. You know, the guy's not like the fastest dude, but like in this system, like he is a guy, man. He is a phenomenal run stuffer, as he had 52 stops last season, defensive stops. Those are basically tackles resulting in 0 yards gained or a negative loss, which that's kind of redundant, negative and loss. But he also was able to put pressure on with 19 pressures, 4 sacks, and he wasn't bad in coverage. Like 3 interceptions, two pass breakups. He allowed the typical 77.6% in coverage, but that's fine. That's average typically for linebackers. Anyway, so like, yeah, man, like he has edged out a role as a big part of this defense. You got Divine Diablo there as well, who he moves exceptionally well. He's a very good tackler. He's always got his nose around the football. You just kind of you are hoping for a bit more in coverage from him, which, I mean, just again with his type of movement skills, and it just hasn't come to fruition. Not saying he's been bad in coverage, he hasn't. It's just you were kind of hoping maybe for a bit more splash plays. But another dude that has been very solid and a very good at bringing down ball carriers in that second level. So like, let's look at the depth here at the linebacker position, as they drafted Tommy Eichenberg out of the 5th round, but by no means does that make him the next guy up. Luke Masterson stepped in, got hurt last year relatively early, but he played really well, and he's probably going to end up being like the first guy, if injury happens, the first guy to step in. Then they also have a couple couple of a smaller guy here in Darren Butler, who I really liked out of Arizona State a couple of years ago. You got Amani Burney, who was probably more of a special teamer. I believe he got hurt last year. Might be thinking of the other. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of the other Florida linebacker. I think he actually plays for the Jags. It was Ventrell Jones. I don't know. It's either here or there. Regardless, he got hurt prior to the season. But yeah, Bernie's going to be a solid special teamer. Then when we're talking about the coverage unit, I think it's going to be better than you expect. Like, I got a B- grade for the coverage unit. Like, Nate Hobbs, we already know he's kind of that guy. That dog, he could play inside, he could play out. And then Jack Jones, he moves over to this squad off the waiver and is like, oh, wow. I think we got a really good starting corner here. Did kind of not play himself, but got in the doghouse there in New England, which led to his release. Because he showed some promise as a rookie for the Patriots, but they didn't want to put up with some of his nonsense. And he comes over here, and as long as you can keep him in check, and I'm so confident that Antonio Pierce can do that, then yeah, you feel really good about what you got there for virtually nothing. You brought him onto the squad. And then Jacorian Bennett probably looks like he's going to be the starter there. Not to say he won't be challenged by anyone, because he certainly will. And we could probably talk about the cornerback depth real quick here. As Jacorian Bennett, he got hurt relatively early with like a hamstring, got banged up with the shoulder, only played 361 snaps, didn't look all that pretty, but he was someone you just drafted in the 4th round, so someone you're not going to discard and give up on, but he can be pushed by like a Brandon Faison. This is a cat that's feels like he always ends up seeing significant playing time no matter where he goes, whether it was with the Raiders a couple of years ago or with the I think it was the Colts last year, not last year but maybe the year before. I can't recall, but Faison, you can't sleep on him. He might be someone who, if Bennett struggles, will step in and they'll roll with him, or maybe Richardson, the rookie, gets a shot. That would be hella great, hella fun. Because I really like his potential. Maybe even like they kick Nate Hobbs back outside, and maybe you go with like Devonshire. I don't know how they feel about Sam Webb, someone who I think been on the practice squad last couple of years. So maybe they go with that route. Like there's possibilities here. But talking about some of the other guys they have here in depth. Again, I kind of went over why I loved MJ Devonshire. I think with Faison, Richardson, Devonshire, those are the guys that are going to make the squad. They do have Sam Webb. Wasn't that high on him coming out, so like, yeah, I could see him going back to the practice squad or bouncing around the league. In terms of some of the UDFAs, they brought in Woo Governor from Northern Iowa. He's got some ball skills. Didn't test out like great in terms of agility. That's not the end all be all, but he probably a candidate for the practice squad. Same with Jaquan Shepard, who actually tested out real slow at 4.62. Again, not to say he can't cut it because he is a bigger cornerback, but he's probably on the outside looking in. And we can talk about this. We'll just talk about the safety group right here, as Travon Merrick had a good comeback year. After kind of having a sophomore slump, he had the type of year he needed. Ended up having 4 pass breakups, 3 interceptions. So real happy about that. On top of that, Marcus Epps is playing good football for the Raiders. You kind of look at these guys and you're pretty content with them as starters. Not to say like, oh man, there's a potential we could probably go out and try to upgrade these guys. But like, in all honesty, like with Marcus Epps, he's kind of like a Xavier Woods to me, you know, where it's like, oh, wherever he goes, solid starter. You plug him in and you really probably don't have to worry about that position. And then Merrick, you're kind of hoping this kind of ends up being a contract year, that he could take that step from like okay to like good, above average, maybe like a top 15 safety in the league. You're kind of hoping he takes that next jump. The depth behind him is actually pretty solid. Guys like Chris Smith, I was a big fan of Chris Smith coming out of Georgia. Someone who was hard, like might not have like high-end athletic traits, but like he never found himself out of position really. Isaiah Palamal, probably butchered that, but I liked him coming out of USC, man. He was, for me, kind of a linebacker safety hybrid. Someone who loved playing around the box and just coming in and just smacking guys around the line of scrimmage. But I truthfully believe Trey Taylor, someone who they drafted in the 7th round, talked about him a bit when we were talking about the draft picks, could potentially unseat one of those two, whether it's Smith or Palamal. I think he's that gifted, that talented, someone that probably should have went a round or two earlier than where he did. So, like, be on the look for that. But all in all, I feel really good about the defense. The defense was just super reliable, helped keep this team in games last season, and I think that'll probably be the same case this year. But let's go ahead and talk about how they may do in 2024. So keep in mind, last season the Raiders finished 8-9 with the 14th easiest schedule, so kind of a middle of the road schedule. I know there was a lot of turmoil there with Josh McDaniels. He turned over a new leaf with Antonio Pierce in the second half of the season. But you're going to be facing a harder schedule. I got him with the 9th hardest schedule this season. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the game by game as you will open the year with the Chargers. And I mean, this one will be at home for the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh's first game. Like, I think maybe you get it. This could be a rude awakening, but honestly, it should be a game maybe the Raiders should win. I don't know. That one's going to be fascinating. But Ravens in week 2, that's kind of a tough get, but I think y'all could take out the Panthers. That's a winnable game. Browns, Raiders, golly, talk about a toss-up. I'm going to lean with the Browns in this case. Broncos, I feel like you could probably split with the Broncos. To be fair, you could probably split games with the whole division. Steelers are a winnable game. This one's going to be fascinating, but you got the Rams coming off your bye. That's kind of unlikely. Bengals, if they can stay healthy, that's going to be a tough one. You exit your bye to what? Head to Miami again? Golly, that sucks. That's tough. Let's look at the games down the stretch. Okay, let's say you win 2 on the Chargers. The Saints game, it's gonna be fascinating. Yeah, low key. Raiders fans, this might feel like an insult, or at least when it comes to the roster. Listen, don't the Raiders feel like the Saints of the AFC a little bit? Let's go. Let's say I think the Raiders could edge them out here. Take out the Jags. Let's give them one against the Falcons. At Tampa Bay is gonna be a little bit tougher. But let's say they win one of these harder games. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's say you upset Miami. You upset my Dolphins. I think this is fair. So right here. Oh, did I give you all a loss somewhere? Whoops. Here you go. So that's 10 wins. I don't think that's necessarily the ceiling of this team. Let's give them maybe another hard win. So 11 wins. I think 11 wins is a good ceiling. The good ceiling for a team that's trying to undo the errors of the past when it came to Josh McDaniels. I think that would be a good step in the right direction. I'm not that confident when it comes to my season prediction because I do view this as a very hard schedule. Like having to face the Dolphins at home coming out of your bye, I just don't think that's something that's going to happen. I do think you probably split with the Chiefs. I think the Bucks are better than people expect. No, I'm going to keep that there. Let's give these teams wins. And I actually think the Chargers win opening day, and you get your win back later at home at the last week of the season. I got the Raiders going 9-8. You might be like, what? After all we went through last season? Correction. The first half of last season. You got us going 9-8. And to be fair, like, I'm not saying this team didn't improve. They certainly did. You're dealing with the tougher schedule. And still, the questions at quarterback. Like, Antonio Pierce went 5-4 during that 9-game stretch. So I think going like 9-8 is in the realm of possibility. It certainly is. And like, in my opinion, you only fall 2 games short of your ceiling. So I don't think that's bad, but I love the direction the Raiders are heading. I think this is more than a 1-year turnaround. I think next offseason is going to be huge for the Raiders. What parts they add and what they do at quarterback is going to be huge. But I'm here for it. I'm excited. Let me know, Raiders fans, what you think in the comment section below. If you want to check out more of these deep dive videos, I've already done the Chargers and the Broncos. So you can go ahead and check those videos out here. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.